Welcome to the Radiant Visalia podcast. Join us at one of our two services, 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. Download the Church Center app or visit our website, radiantvisalia.com, to stay connected with us. All right, enjoy.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find.
Hey, if you've got a Bible, open it to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. If you don't have a Bible, we can put the words on the screen because Eric is back. So, Eric is back, enabling your laziness. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. If you don't know where 2 Corinthians is at, there's a table of contents at the beginning of the Bible. It'll help you find it. We've been studying the book of 2 Corinthians, and we're going to continue in this series. The Apostle Paul planted a church in Corinth, and 2 Corinthians is a letter to that church. Paul was on his second missionary journey when he planted this church. It took him 1.5 years to plant a church there, and then he left to plant a church in another city. When he left, new leaders came in, and those new leaders were questioning Paul's leadership, questioning Paul's doctrine, and they were swaying this church away from Paul. And so Paul was engaged in this battle, trying to win the heart of this church back, trying to win these people back. And 2 Corinthians is a letter written to the Corinthian church after Paul found out that the Corinthian church wanted to get back together. So he won them back. They broke up for a time, but Paul won this church back. And 2 Corinthians is a letter written to them after Paul found out that they're going to get back together. They now want Paul's leadership. They now want Paul's direction. They want, again, Paul's correction in their church. They're receiving him as an apostle, receiving him as a leader again. They're no longer broken up. Paul and this church have gotten back together. But you know, if you've been through a breakup, anybody been through a breakup and then you ended up back together? If that's happened to you, then you know that there's a lot of things to talk through. It's not just like, well, we're back together and everything's hunky-dory. No, we're back together and we need to talk about some things. What the heck went wrong? Why'd you do that? Why did you say that? If we love each other so much, then why does this thing go down like this? What's going on here? We need to talk this through. And so 2 Corinthians is basically Paul talking it through with them. It's a very personal letter as we've studied up to this point. Paul's really opening his heart to these people. I know we've been through conflict together, but my heart is wide open. My heart is wide open towards you. I love you guys. I'm for this church. I want to lead again in this church, and you want my leadership. So let's do this. Let's get on together. So, starting in chapter 8, verse 1, let me read to you. This is Paul talking to this church that he loves in Corinth. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. Accordingly, we urged Titus, that as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. But as you, back to the Corinthians, as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you, see that you excel in this act of grace also. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others that your love is also genuine. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you, by his poverty, might become rich. And in this matter I give my judgment. This benefits you, who a year ago started not only to do this work, but also to desire to do it. So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring it may be So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring it may be matched by your completing it out. Let's go one more time. Here we go. Verse 11. So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring it may be matched by your completing it out of what you have. For if the readiness is there, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. For I do not mean that others should be eased and you be burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness. As it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. So Paul is going around to the churches that he planted, the churches that he brings direction to, and he is receiving, and offering for the church back in Jerusalem that's going through a hard time. And he's saying here to the Corinthian church, you should have seen what happened in Macedonia. You should have seen what happened with the Macedonians. And he lifts up the Macedonian church as a model church. You should have seen how they gave. And in lifting up the Macedonians as a model church, he's calling the Corinthians to give, to see relief in the church there in Jerusalem. And I wish I could read more of Corinthians to you, but apparently I can't get through verse 11, so I should not be allowed to read out loud, which is sometimes really difficult. Have you ever tried to read aloud? It makes more sense in my head. But I wish I could read you more of 2 Corinthians, just so you could see how awkward this is. Chapter 8 kind of comes out of nowhere. He's humming along, giving instruction, correction, direction to the church in Corinth. My heart's wide open to you guys. I'm so glad we're back together. Hey, I want to tell you about this other church, this church in Macedonia. Man, it's amazing what they've done. You should have been there. You should have seen what happened when I was there. And Paul starts to compare this church with another church. He starts to compare the Corinthian church with these Macedonian churches, which were, the Macedonian church, they're like the supermodels of generosity. They are killing it when it comes to generosity. And Paul starts to compare the Corinthian church, who seems to be struggling, that hasn't finished this work that they set out to do. He starts comparing this church with the Macedonian church, who's just crushing it in this area of generosity. And we don't like to be compared. Well, we like to be compared to people that we're doing better than, but we don't like to be compared to people who are crushing it, do we? We don't like that. And comparison, can be super hurtful. But comparison can also be really helpful. And Paul here is not looking to hurt this church through comparison. He's looking to hold up a picture of health. This is what it looks like. This is what it can be. This is what I want to call you to. I want you to see where you're at. I want you to compare. I want you to contrast. where you're at with where the Macedonian church is at. I want you to do that, not to be hurtful or not to incite some sort of rivalry among churches. Paul isn't out there bleeding for these churches to incite some sort of rivalry between these churches. He's not looking to be hurtful as he compares these two things. He's looking to be helpful as he holds up a picture of what health looks like. It's very loving to show someone a standard of health. It can be very loving to show someone a picture of what something should look like. Not just hurtful, like, hey, maybe your casserole could be a little bit more like hers. Not hurtful in that way, but really helpful. Hers is edible, yours is not. Taste this. You might want to try it. It's loving for the doctor to show you what healthy looks like. It's loving for the doctor to tell you, no, this is what a healthy cholesterol level looks like. Don't compare me. I'm fine just the way I am. No. This is a standard of health. This is where it should be, and it's really loving for a doctor to do that. It's really helpful. It's really loving for a doctor to hold up an x-ray of what your spine should look like in comparison to the one that's bent over now. And for you to go, because when all you've seen is the brokenness, when all you see is the unhealth, you don't know that there's anything wrong with it until they hold up a picture of what your arm, bone, whatever it is, should look like. And you go, well, that one has a crack in it, and that one doesn't. And that's the way it should look. For most of us, even at the doctor, it can at times be like, I don't appreciate you telling me what healthy blood pressure should be. I don't appreciate you telling me what my cholesterol should be. Don't compare me. I'm perfect just the way I am. God loves me just the way I am. This Macedonian church is a model church. We're still holding up the Macedonian church going, this is what it should look like. Look how amazing this is. Look at what it's like when it's right, when it's working. Man, look at what it should be. Thousands of years later, what an amazing thing. This church, in their extreme poverty, in a test of affliction, they pony up, they take this offering. And Paul's like, you wouldn't believe it. They were like begging for the opportunity. It wasn't that I was up front begging them to give. They were begging for the opportunity to give. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. There's two verses that pastors daydream about. One is in Acts when Peter gets done preaching and the mob of people goes, what shall we do to be saved? And every pastor longs for the day when they preach with such conviction that everyone stands up and is just like, what shall we do to be saved? And I'm not saying this is what you should do to be saved, but people are like, oh, what should I do to be saved? And then you're just, well, it's going to be tough. And I'll explain it to you. But you're just then explaining, you're just then answering this cry in people's hearts. And the other passage we daydream about is this one, where there's a group of people and they're just like, we're begging for the opportunity to give. It's not that you're begging up front, trying to enroll people into giving. It's that they're begging for the opportunity to give. Every pastor longs to see it. We're all praying for it. The Macedonian church is this model of what it looks like. It's this thing that every pastor dreams about. No one likes to be compared to somebody who's killing it. It's not what I like. Did anyone come to your house and talk about a turkey that they once had? Not the turkey that you had prepared, but the turkey, have you ever had it deep pitted? It's like, no, I haven't. Well, it's so moist, Just falls off the bone. But your turkey needs to be saved by gravy. Oh, have you ever barbecued it? Have you ever done it on the grill? No, I haven't. We just throw ours in the oven. Oh man, well did anyone come to your house and go on and on about somebody else's food? It's not welcomed. Don't compare my turkey to a turkey that's killing it. Just be thankful for the turkey you've got. Churches, this happens for me because people go home during the holidays, and then they come back and they tell me about their church back home that's killing it. And I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to hear those things. I mean, I smile and I'm like, that's so cool that that's going on. But inside, I'm really insecure. And so when you're like, oh my goodness, they just pray, you should hear them pray. I'm like, what I hear is you don't pray. And no one here prays. That's what I hear. And that's what goes on for me. And I don't welcome comparing our church with theirs when their church is killing it. I welcome you coming back and saying, I went to my parents' church, man, it's dead. I'm so glad to be here. And your preaching is amazing, I don't like you coming home with a report that like, I was so fed, you should hear this sermon. Don't give me a CD or a link to somebody else's preaching. I'm going to pretend like I listened to it, but I'm not because it makes me feel bad. I don't want to compare myself to somebody who's killing it. Ladies, can you imagine if this were a letter to you and not a letter to a church where Paul's humming along, praising you, saying, wow, my heart's wide open. I'm so excited that we're back together. Hey, I just want to pause and tell you about this other lady who's just killing it right now. It's like, no thanks. No thanks. I don't want to hear about her. This is awkward. You were going on and on about me and about our relationship, and now you just start talking about some other lady. Or what about guys? You see yourself in the war movie where you're in the trenches, you're away at war, and you get a letter from that special lady back home, and, the letter smells like her perfume, and there's some, like, handmade, like, handkerchief that's in it that you just smell, and you read the letter over and over again just to, you've seen the scene 1,000 times. It's in, like, every war movie, And you just read the letter just hoping to get back home. And what if in that letter, I just can't wait to be together again. I want to tell you about this guy back home. I've just grown to like him so much. He's just killing it in these areas. You're just like, when I get home from war, I'm going to kill him. Like, I don't care about this other guy. It doesn't bring me any comfort to be compared to this guy. I hate this letter right now. That's what would happen in my imaginary world. We don't deal well with competition, especially when the competition is killing it. We don't want to be compared. And Jesus doesn't want to be compared either. He doesn't mix well with others. This is not Panera where you get to pick two. You pick one. You get either soup or you get a sandwich. You can't pick two. He doesn't share the stage. Jesus does not share the stage. He's not interested in that. In fact, he's interested in you calling him Lord, which is a really exclusive term. In fact, if he's not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. You can't call him that. And when people called him Master, he didn't stop them from saying that. When they said Master, he was like, you know what? Call me Jesus, your homeboy. No. Totally okay with you calling him Master. Totally okay with you calling him Lord. He doesn't mix well with others. He doesn't share the stage. When Jesus thinks about my heart, when he thinks about your heart, when he thinks about what competes with him for our affection, when he thinks about what competes on this stage, on the stage of our lives, in our hearts, with our affections, what do you think Jesus thinks is his top competitor? What do you think he's saying, look, I won't mix down with that? I found it really interesting to see how serious Jesus takes the value that we place on money. When he thinks about our affection, when he thinks about what pulls us away from him, Jesus has some things to say about money. Let me read you this scripture. You've probably heard it before, but I wanted to read it a little bit differently because I thought it was a little bit, I don't know. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and his top competitor, Satan. That's what you'd expect it to read. At least I thought the devil should be public enemy number one. No, you can't serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. So you got to pick. You can pick God or the devil. That's how this goes down. You got two options. You can pick God or you can pick the devil. We don't mix down. I don't share the stage with that guy. No, that's too obvious. Satan will never steal our affection from Jesus by causing us to fall in love with him. We would never take that bait. That's way too obvious. Well, you can do crosses or pentagrams. It's like even for Jesus, even for not, you're not a church person, you're like, I'm not going to take that trade. It's not an option for me. I'd way rather have a cross over a pentagram. It never presents itself that way. Satan never steals our affection away from Jesus by causing us to fall in love with him. He knows better than that. Well, you can go to church on Sunday morning, or you can sacrifice some goats in a satanic ritual. Well, no thanks. I don't want to sacrifice goats. I don't know how I feel about Jesus or church, but I'm not up for sacrificing goats in a satanic ritual. It's too obvious. No one would take that trade. That trade won't go down. Satan never steals our affection away from Jesus by causing us to fall in love with him. Satan pulls our hearts away from Jesus by causing us to fall in love with anything but Jesus. He'll take anything and look to insert it in that top spot. And Jesus says, concerning your heart, the thing that often gets inserted in that top spot is a love of money. Finding security in money. Being possessed by your possessions. Jesus takes it very seriously and has a lot to say about it. Well, Jesus never talked about money. He only talked about grace. Man, I was surprised to find out that Jesus always talked about money. Why? Because Jesus cares about money? No, he cares about your heart. And your money is a show of your heart. It's a show of what you value. It's a show of your affection. It's a show of what you desire. And he's jealous for you. He doesn't need your money. He's after your heart. And your money reveals your heart. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Well, is he broke? Why does he need my money? Is the church broke? Why do they need my money? No. This is an issue of the heart. That's why Jesus talks about it so often. 11 out of 39 of the parables have to do with money. Jesus wanted to connect with people where they were at. We spend much of our time thinking, obsessing, talking about money. Thinking that it can provide us with security. Thinking that it can be a functional savior. Thinking that it can bring us the comfort we need. And Jesus is saying, I don't mix well with this. I'm just letting you know right now, I won't share the stage with money. You pick. And it's not so obvious. God or the devil? It's God and money. You can't serve both those things. It doesn't happen. How are you doing in this? I ask myself the question, how are we doing in this? Has the love of money crept in? How much time do you spend thinking about money? Are you putting your trust in what you have? Has money subtly become for you a functional savior? Whether you have it or not, that's not the issue. Well, it's like, no, it's not a savior because I don't have it. It's like, no, but we spend our time thinking about it, dwelling on it, desiring it, thinking that if we had it, then it would save us. And Jesus is saying, no, I'll do the saving here. So this passage is meant to test the Corinthian church. It really is. It's meant to test them. And I'm interested in this passage testing us. I'm interested not just in trying to read this passage, which is troubling. I'm interested in being read by this passage. Where are we at? Again, as the Macedonian church is lifted up, can you believe this equation? I'm interested in, testing ourselves, seeing where we're at in this battle, in this war against the love of money and materialism. So 3 things we learn from the Macedonian church. There's way more than 3 that you'll learn from the Macedonian church, but this is a sermon, so it's 3. And 3 things that we learned from the Corinthian church about generosity, about giving, about excelling in the grace of giving. Apparently, that the grace of God wasn't just coming to us, but the grace of God was wanting to do something through us. That's what Paul's saying. They're excelling in this grace of giving. And you should do it also. And I believe that God would say those things to us. This church was excelling in this, and you should excel in the grace of giving also. 3 things that we learn from the Macedonians. The first thing we learn from the Macedonians about generosity is that generosity is not an amount. When it comes to generosity, the amount doesn't count. You can't just look at the zeros and go, wow, what a generous gift. You can't just assume because Oprah gave everyone in the audience one of those things that Oprah is generous. I guarantee you that cost her nothing. You can't just assume because it's a big gift that it is a generous gift. And the Macedonian church excelled in the grace of giving because they knew that being generous wasn't about an amount. That being generous wasn't about being rich. They dismissed the myth that when I'm rich, then I'll be generous. And in the middle of their poverty, their extreme poverty, they decided, I can be generous. I can do this. And they didn't pass the buck thinking, well, obviously there's someone sitting a couple rows behind me. I saw what he pulled up in, and he's probably in a better spot to take care of this need. They didn't sign off. They took it on. They're like, we can do this. We can be generous. In our poverty, with the very little that we have, we can be generous because generosity is not about an amount. And for most of us, we're living in this myth of if or when, then. Well, when I'm making this much, then I'll be generous. If you would have told me as a 19-year-old what I'd be making right now, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'll probably build orphanages. I mean, when it's like all I do is eat Taco Bell, snowboard and, whatever else. If you would have told me you'll be making this amount each month, I'd be like, I'll be swimming. It'll be like DuckTales. I'll be backpedaling in my cash, But it doesn't work that way. Have you discovered this? This myth of when, then, is not panning out for me the way I want it to. Well, when I get here, then I'll do these things. When you get there, you will continue to do what you're doing right now. That's what I guarantee. When another zero gets added to it, you'll do exactly what you're doing right now. I once talked to a young man, and he told me, I'm going to be an actor, and I'm going to use the stage, the fame that I get as an actor, to reach people for Christ. And I said, well, what are you doing with the stage you have right now as a barista at Starbucks? Are you sharing your faith now? No. But when I become a famous actor, then I'll start sharing my faith. No, you won't. You won't. You'll just keep doing what you're doing right now. And the Macedonians were like, we're not buying it. Generosity is not an amount. Generosity is not a when, then. Generosity is an opportunity right now, and we're going to do this. And they excelled in the grace of giving because of it. Look at this equation. It's just crazy. I still don't know exactly. I'm not a math guy. But severe test of affliction plus abundance of joy, there's a problem there, plus extreme poverty equals an overflow of wealth of generosity. This is gospel math. This is amazing. Severe test of affliction plus their abundance of joy plus their extreme poverty equals a wealth of generosity on their part. They understood that everyone can be generous. The generous isn't about an amount. We don't excel at the grace of giving because we think it's an amount that counts. And so we are waiting. And it's not happening. Look at this passage in Mark 12. You can turn there. If you brought a Bible, if you didn't, again, Eric got it up on the screen. This is Jesus. And if you thought the first passage was awkward because Paul started going on about another church, this passage is even more awkward. This is concerning Jesus and your money. And Jesus sat down opposite the treasury. This is Mark 12, verses 41 through 44. And Jesus sat down opposite the treasury, and he watched people putting money into the offering box. He just camped there, and he watched. He didn't look away. I mean, the equivalent of that, I'm trying hard right now not to even make eye contact with people because I'm scared you're going to read into that. Well, he must know what I give, and that's why he's staring at me right now. So I'm just like trying to keep my eyes moving so that no one feels awkward. And Jesus isn't totally interested in you feeling comfortable. And so if Jesus were here and he would have received the offering, instead of being one of the guys who sends it down the row and looks away so as to not watch, it's like Jesus walked like this. Jonathan, what do you got? Rich. Huh. Interesting. Lori. Eric. Wow. Okay. He just walked. Watched. Didn't look away. Wasn't totally, just didn't care that it made people feel awkward. It says that many rich people put in large sums. So I don't know how that worked, how he saw that. I don't know if, again, it was like DuckTales, like a bag of gold, like you could hear it drop, making splash. Or if it was like big publisher clearinghouse checks that these guys were dropping in. Many rich people are dropping in large amounts. And then a poor widow came. Man, I love Jesus. I love Jesus. Who does stuff like this? A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And then he stopped and he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly, I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. All of it totaled doesn't touch what this widow dropped." And the disciples must have been like, "Jesus, obviously you have no understanding of how math works." Which is another reason I love Jesus, because I don't like math either. And the disciples would have been like, "Hey, listen, man, healing's your sweet spot. You do it better than anybody else. And it's really a strong suit, and we think you should play to your strengths. And teaching, you're like an amazing teacher, but we're going to keep you away from the money, okay? Because obviously you have no understanding of bookkeeping. So it's a good thing that you got some tax collectors on board who can keep the books straight because your math is a little bit wonky. This woman did not give more than those who were here." And Jesus is uninterested in the amount because the amount doesn't count when it comes to generosity. And Jesus wasn't pleased by the size of the gift. He seems pretty unfazed as he walks through. He's pleased by what he saw in her heart. He obviously wasn't excited about a penny. What he was excited about was that she trusted God and she wasn't trusting money. This is what's getting me excited. So I won't share the stage with this stuff. This woman knows that. She's not putting her trust, she's not putting her faith. What she has, she's trusting God. And we give until it hurts. We don't give when it hurts. And the Macedonian church is this forever picture of health because they gave when it hurt. There was sacrifice involved. Significant sacrifice involved. And sometimes there can be zeros on a check, and it represents no sacrifice because it doesn't cramp our style. We'll give until it starts to hurt our lifestyle, not when it costs us. We don't want our lifestyle to get touched. And so we'll give right up to that edge. We'll even toy with that edge from time to time. The Macedonians are a model of what it looks like to be generous because they just straight blew that stop sign. And they made a significant sacrifice. The Macedonian church excelled in the grace of giving because they saw it as an opportunity. It's like Paul can hear what the Corinthians are thinking. It's like, wait a second, these people were in extreme poverty, and then you went and shook them down for the last bits they had? And Paul's like, no. You wouldn't believe what happened. They were begging for the opportunity to give. It wasn't that I shook them down with guilt. It wasn't that I inspired them with my words. They were begging for the opportunity. They thought, oh, this is a favor. Paul's doing us a favor in our extreme poverty by passing the plate. This is an opportunity. I mean, they must have thought like, this is a wise investment. This is a good way to give what we have. Jesus is not anti-money. Jesus is not anti-treasure. Jesus is not anti-investing. He wants you to see and then seize the opportunities that you have to be rich in good deeds. He doesn't command the rich to not be rich. He commands the rich to be rich in good deeds. He's not anti-treasure. He's not anti-investing. He's actually anti-stupid investing. Anti-short-term investing. You meet anyone who's good with money and they're anti-short-term investing. Well, it's going to yield that. No, it's not. I've seen this before. This is my first rodeo. Anybody who's good with their money is anti-stupid short-term investing. Jesus is no different. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Don't do that. Don't store up treasure in this place where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But do lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. No. Invest for sure. Just send it on. Don't invest it in things that can be destroyed. Invest in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Money is not evil. The love of money is the root of all evil, says 1 Timothy. Money itself is not evil. This is what money is for us. It is a tool to build the kingdom you believe in. And that's what you will do with your money. That's what you are doing with your money. Money is a tool to build the kingdom you believe in. So here we are at the close of 2015. You can look back and see that you built the kingdom that you believe in with your money. That's what it is for us. It's a tool. And the Macedonians excelled at giving because they saw an opportunity to build the kingdom. They saw money as a tool to do something greater. The third thing that the Macedonians did that caused them to excel in the grace of giving, which I think is so cool that Paul included this. They gave themselves first to the Lord and then by the will of God to us. He's like, they had some sense that they weren't giving to another church. They had some sense that they weren't giving to a famine. They had some sense that they weren't giving to a need. It wasn't that I stood up and started telling them about the need and said, give to the need. Give to the need. They understood that when they gave, they were first giving themselves to the Lord. That they weren't giving to a church, that they weren't giving to a famine, that they were giving to God when they gave. And they had a sense of that. And they excelled in the grace of giving because they gave themselves first to the Lord. They could have given themselves first to Paul. Paul was a massive character. I mean, I would not want to be on Paul's bad side. If Paul was here calling for an offering, he'd probably be like, man, dig deep. Like, we don't want to piss Paul off. Paul's the wrong guy to upset. They could have been like, well, we gave ourselves first to Paul because he seemed pretty passionate about this offering. And then, by the will of God, to these others. No. They had some understanding that when they gave, they were giving to God. Is that your understanding? You will not excel in the grace of giving unless that's your understanding. What I'm doing first for the Lord. And then, by the will of God, it's going to do some other things. But I'm called to this. 3 things we learn about generosity from the Corinthian church. The first thing we learn from the Corinthian church from this passage is your wallet is always the last thing to get saved. Jesus will get a bunch of stuff before he gets your money. I mean, it's like Paul's saying to them, look, guys, you're crushing it in all of these areas, and I want you to excel in this area as well. You're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. You excel in everything, he says to this church. In faith, you're doing really well. In speech, you're doing really well. In knowledge, you're growing. In all earnestness and our love for you, you're excelling in these areas. But the last thing, the last frontier that I'm calling you to excel in is your money, is your giving. Excel also in the grace of giving. And this is going to hit some of us right between the eyes. Because it's the last frontier, isn't it? Jesus has already gotten a bunch of things, but he hasn't gotten our money yet. And it is just pretty wild to think about, because we say things like, well, he has my heart. And then we say he has my life. And then we say, we are trusting this God that we have not seen for a place we have not seen, and we're actually going to live there forever after we die. That's what you say. And then we don't trust him with our money. I don't know, there's something super fishy about that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Trusting him for heaven, trusting him for eternal, trusting him for your salvation. And it's like, you know what? But I'm not going to trust him with my money. If you don't trust him with your money, you don't trust him. You guys are doing really well in a lot of areas, excelling. Like, you've given him some serious stuff. You've given him your speech. You've given him your mind. You've given him your marriage. You've given him your life. Now excel in the grace of giving as well. Surrender. The second thing that we learn from the Corinthian church about generosity, about giving, is that generous is not the only thing we're called to be. And I found this maybe most compelling this week. Generous is not the only thing you're called to be. I think some of us check out when there's a call to be generous because we think it's a call to be mindless or spontaneous or emotional or frivolous, that someone just hops up and presents this compelling need before you, and then you're supposed to be generous and just kind of throw it all up in the air, that's what generosity is. And I want to say to you that we're called to be more than generous. As Christians, we're called to be more than generous. We're also called to be faithful. We're also called to be wise. We're also called to be prayerful. All of these things are an expression of who God is. God's not only generous. Well, God was generous. So yeah, he was. He is. But he's so much more than that. He's also just. He's also faithful. Him sending his son was not just an act of generosity. Him sending his son was an act of faithfulness. And we're called to be all of these things. The most generous people I know are not emotional people. They're people who have just decided, this makes sense to live this way. In light of what Christ has done for me, this is how I'm going to roll. And it's not like this. You know, they never have these really like moving, and the Lord put it on my heart. They never say that stuff. They just keep writing monster checks. They keep spending themselves. And it's not an emotional thing. It's actually crazy calculated. It's not a spontaneous thing. They've purposed to do that. It's not like a real in-the-moment thing. It's like, no, this is how I'm going to live. Based on what I know, based on what I understand of the gospel, this is what I'm going to do. So the Macedonians, they didn't buy into this myth that being generous meant being spontaneous. But the Corinthians, there is this charge to the Corinthian church for them to finish what they started. And if you read in 1 Corinthians, Paul told them, I want you guys to set aside some money for this. I'm going to collect this offering to bring to the church in Jerusalem, and I want you guys to get on a plan. I want you to get on a plan, and I want you to set aside this money. But you know what happened? Is they fell on hard times. They started to question Paul. It was like, I don't know, is he coming? Is he not coming? And they just decided to stop giving. That they would stop giving. And now Titus is there, and Paul is appealing to them, finish the task. Finish what you started. I know you had a desire to be generous. And I want you to finish. I want you not just to be generous in the moment. I want you to be faithful. I want you to be prayerful. I want you to be planful. I want you to be more than just generous. And I know in us, in me, in you, is this desire to be generous. I know I don't need to sell this. You want to live like this. But it also requires self-control. It also requires that you be planful. Dang it. I just wanted to be generous. It also has you thinking long term. Well, if I do this with what I've got, then I won't be able to do that with what I got. And I want to do that, so I'm going to say no to this that is in front of me. It's like, dang it, what I want to be is generous, and I'm being asked to be wise, to reflect God. It's like, no. You're called to be more than generous. And that's what the Corinthian church teaches us. You got to finish. We're called to be faithful. We're called to continue and contend and be prayerful and wise and all kinds of other things that reveal the character of God to those around us. So the third thing that we learn from the Corinthian church about generosity, about giving, is that our highest motivation for giving is not like follow through. Our highest motivation for giving is not, man, you got to do it. You got to do it. You ought to give. Our highest motivation for giving is not need. That there's something going down in Jerusalem, it's getting bad. We should take an offering for the church back there. The highest motivation is not guilt. That's not our highest motivation for giving. Our highest motivation, Paul reminds us, is the gospel. The gospel is our highest motivation for giving. And the gospel says before we gave a thing, before we engage in giving, you need to understand that God gave. You need to receive. You need to come first to the Lord and understand what He's given to us. And then you need to excel in this grace. For you know, guys, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though He was rich, yet for your sake He became poor, so that you, by His poverty, might become rich. You know the gospel story. The gospel story is not a rags to riches story. The gospel story is a riches to rags, back to riches. That's what happened. Jesus spent Himself. And so we give because He gave. And you have to understand, please hear me. Please don't walk away going, well, I guess I got to give more. No, please hear me say that God gave. And if you are holding on to your stuff, you've forgotten that Jesus did not hold on to His very life. You don't have a giving problem, you have a gospel problem. You've forgotten what God has done through Christ, who had this incredible place of privilege. And it cost Him greatly. He gave up so much so that He could raise us up into the riches. You don't have a giving problem. Well, I got to follow through, man. Trav really laid it on me, and I really do want to be generous. If you want to be generous, you have to grasp the grace of God that He first gave. He first gave. There's like a thunder lightning deal going on here, and the order matters. You don't give in order to get something from God. We give because we've been given so much. And Paul's saying, if you've got a problem, Corinthian church, your problem is not with your money. Your problem's not with your possessions. Your problem's not with your stuff. Your problem's with your understanding of who God is, how much He loves you, how much He cares for you. If we're holding on to our stuff to create for ourselves security and a future, then we don't fully understand who God is and what He's done and what He intends to provide for us. Would you stand with me? I'd remind you guys of the gospel. God gave, not to get a tax deduction. He didn't give to get a tax deduction. He gave because He wants you. He values you. He's after you. And it makes sense that if He gave up everything, that we would live surrendered lives, even in this area, but that we would offer up even this area of our lives, offer up even our finances. Paul says in this passage, 2 Corinthians 8, that this isn't a command. It's not a command, is what he says to them. I do want to read a command from 1 Timothy 6. These are the words of Paul, and I want you to hear them because I had to listen to them this week, and it was convicting, and so just paying it forward, being generous. Here's Paul. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. As for the rich in this present age, I know that's where you check out. It's oh, good. It's for the guy behind me. Obviously, I'm not rich. We're a part of the richest civilization in the history of mankind. You are in the top 5%. You are the rich of the world. The interesting thing for us Americans is that we don't feel rich. I understand, because feeling rich has to do with margin, and you don't have any margin. I get it. The funny thing is that we don't feel rich, and we are, but we do feel generous, and we aren't. As for the rich, just pretend, maybe. Don't even just humor me for a minute. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. I love that that's in there. Provides us with everything. Rice and beans? No, there's actually some enjoyment here. He'll provide you everything you need to live in Zambia. No. He's interested in your enjoyment. He'll provide you everything you need to enjoy. But what he's saying is the path to being happy involves being generous. I've never met a generous person who isn't happy as well. That's how those things work. They, the rich, are to do good. So he's commanding the rich. It's not hey, rich, let's pretend you're rich. Don't be rich. Hey, rich, be rich. Totally be rich. Be rich in good deeds. Be rich in good deeds. Be rich in good works. Be generous and ready to share. Thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. You can open your hands with the things that you think truly bring life, and God will bring what brings abundant life. You can trust Him with this area. Well, we give to God because He's needy. We give to God because apparently He's insecure and He can't share the stage. No, absolutely not. Well, we give to others because others are needy and others are vulnerable. Well, no, that's not totally it either. We give to God because we're needy. We give to God because we're needy and we're clinging to things that cannot support us. We're leaning on things that will fall over. We're standing on foundations that will crumble. And we send it forward, laying up a good foundation for the future. And through letting go, we take hold of that which is truly life. I'm going to pray. I guess there's plenty of application. Good luck. I'm going to pray.
Thanks for listening. We want to be a resource for you as you walk with Jesus. So please connect with us at radiantvisalia.com. Until next time.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find. Though I love the flowers and trees and the smell of the grinding sea and all the beautiful things here in life. And